Revenue operations is much more than words in a job title. It's a methodology that is transforming sales, marketing, and customer success teams into high-performing revenue drivers. However, many revenue leaders still have critical questions about how to operationalize it. Furthermore, they want to know what others in the industry are doing. That's why we conducted original research and put together our findings in the 2021 Revenue Operations and Customer Acquisition Benchmark Report. In partnership with RevOps Squared, we asked hundreds of cross-departmental revenue leaders across top companies to reveal their approach to revenue planning, analytics and revenue operations, and customer acquisition. We've identified exactly how teams are aligning to hit their revenue targets, as well as the new activity, pipeline, and customer acquisition benchmarks to strive for in 2021 and beyond. Download the entire report for free at ringDNA.com/RevOpsReport.
What if your sales team could know the moment a buyer arrives on your website and talk with them instantly? With Qualified's conversational sales and marketing platform purpose-built for Salesforce, that's all possible. It's not rocket science, it's common sense. Conversations move deals forward. Live chat, voice calls, and meeting bookers accelerate sales conversations without a single email exchange. Capture prospects in that magic moment when they're most interested in learning about your business. Head on over to qualified.com to chat with their team and learn more.
So she didn't see this side of me. And every weekend I was with her, right? So I'd meet her on the weekends. We had a long distance relationship, but if I didn't see her on the weekend, then it was like, I remember I had one buddy I'd go out with and it's like, yes, I can unwind and let this part of me out. And I'd go to his house and I'd just drink 4 or 5 beers and I'd smoke a bunch of pot and I'd just go out to the bars and flirt, and just kind of this other part of me came out. It was almost like two-faced, and I never understood why, but I looked in the mirror and I always questioned myself, why do you do these things? What is wrong with you? And then I would push it in the corner again.
Hi friends, welcome to the Sales Enablement Podcast. I'm your host, Andy Paul. That was Ian Koniak. He's the Strategic Account Director at Salesforce.com. And today is another one of the conversations we're having this month in May 2021 on this show about mental health and sales, or more precisely, mental health in sales. Now, if you have a good memory, you'll recall that today's guest, Ian Koniak, was just on the show, just about 2 months ago. But today we're talking about a topic actually we meant to cover in his last appearance, but we sort of ran out of time, which is namely his struggles with mental health and with his addictions. Now, just a heads up, Ian is incredibly open and honest about his past struggles with addiction and the impact that these have had on his relationships, his family, and his work. We also get into the topic of burnout, why it's too easy in sales to be out of balance with work and life and to be outwardly successful, but to feel empty and disconnected from all of that inside. I certainly felt that at one point in my own career, and as I'm sure many of you have. And Ian shares his advice about what he's done to bring everything back into alignment and how he works hard to keep it that way. All this and much, much more. But before we get to Ian, I want to remind you to subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen to it. And if you subscribe, we'd certainly appreciate it if you could also give us your feedback about how we're doing in the form of a review. So thank you. All right, let's jump into it. Ian, welcome back to the show.
It is so good to see you, Andy, again after a few months.
Yeah, so you've been on paternity leave. How's that going?
I'm loving it. I'm spending time with my family. I am focusing on my health. I just got my second COVID shot today.
Yay!
So hopefully we'll start to go back, a little bit back to normal and start hanging out with friends again. So everything's on the up right now.
That's been the nice thing about it. Yeah, it's just see people and not be as concerned about it. And we're not back to full relaxation yet, as we shouldn't be, but we can see the light at the end of the tunnel, so that's encouraging for sure. Well, I really appreciate you coming back so soon and spending time with me, because last time we'd meant to talk about personal topic for you, which we sort of got sidetracked when it was a great conversation. But now in May, as part of Mental Health Awareness Month, we're having a number of conversations with successful people such as yourself that have been affected by issues like addiction. And so we want to talk about sobriety. We want to talk about your journey to the extent you feel comfortable, and share some things that can be helpful to other people that are listening to this, might be similarly struggling. So I appreciate you coming back on.
Absolutely, and that's the goal, is to help people who may be able to relate to something they're going through.
So start at the beginning. So what was your story? I mean, what happened?
So I guess my story with addiction starts when I was probably 12 years old.
12.
And well, it starts before I was born, because I was, like many addicts and most addicts I've encountered, there's a generational element to it.
Mm-hmm.
So my father had struggled with alcohol his whole life. He was an alcoholic, and he ended up getting sober a couple years before he died. But he died, it was already too late. It was a lifetime of excess for him. He was 53 years old. Not too long after that, my first cousin, passed away at 47 years old. He was a Wall Street banker, and was very high stress job. And he left 4 children and a family. And unfortunately, all this came pretty close to home, but I never really acknowledged the fact that I had any problems with addiction. In fact, I said, I am not going to be like my family. I'm not going to be like my father, my cousin, my brother. All the males pretty much in my family struggle with this. And I just was always a high performer in work and in sales. And so I thought, you know what, this is something that I that I don't have a problem with. And what happened is I just kind of pushed it in the closet, and I kept a lot of secrets. And, because it never got to a point until fairly recently where it affected my family or it affected my work, I always kind of made the mistake of thinking I didn't have a problem. And it was only until, I thought I was going to lose my wife when I acknowledged it. And, fortunately, I've been sober from many vices for about 14 months. I've been putting in a lot of work for recovery, and I really do feel like a new man and a new person. But I will say I've struggled with addiction for the bulk of my life since the time I was really probably 12 years old till I got sober when I was 41. So most of my life.
So what were the substances? And what was sort of your pattern that you were going through? And I'm curious about several things, about also the fact you said you were wasn't affecting your work. And maybe it was just, you weren't able to see that because other people weren't aware of it. I mean, maybe start back at the beginning of your career. I mean, you started your career obviously with an addiction.
Yeah, I sure did. I mean, so I'll give you, I'll try and give you the short version. So the substances were many substances. So in college, it was mostly marijuana, but then I experimented with some harder drugs. Drugs and alcohol were a big thing in college. And
right.
Interestingly, I just thought that was part of the college experience, and still graduated in 4 years and went to Berkeley and got a pretty good GPA. So again, I was able to skate by and perform without letting it affect my grades or dropping out of school or anything like that. And so I graduate college, and I go into a program, and I become an English teacher for a year, and I live in South America because I love traveling. And that was my addiction at the time. It was travel. I just wanted to travel. I traveled after I graduated, and I was traveling all around South America, and I was a teacher. And there was not a lot of substances there for me to party with. I always just kind of considered myself a guy who worked hard and played hard and liked to party. And I got to Venezuela, and I was a teacher, and I was living with a family, and it was, environment is very powerful because I wasn't with drinkers. There were no drugs, and I didn't have access to sex, right? Those are kind of my vices when I was a single guy, sleeping with a lot of women, getting drunk and taking drugs. And it was something that I just thought came with the territory of being young. So I go to Venezuela, I meet the love of my life at the time. I'm so healthy. I'm climbing mountains. I'm, camping and backpacking and doing photography. And then I get back into the US, and that really kind of started my career journey of addiction, because now I was out without the girlfriend because I didn't have money to pay for her to come to the US and put her through college. That's actually how I got into sales. I think I mentioned that last time. But in that journey, I went from like freedom and independence and dream job to living with my parents and no money and no girlfriend. So I definitely was working extremely hard. I was under a huge amount of stress to try and save up enough money to support both of us.
And what were you doing at that time?
I was selling copiers door to door. So that's how I got into sales. I started with copiers, and it was a high volume, high activity, high adrenaline job, my first sales job. And I was so damn determined to hit my goal of getting her to the US that I carried a lot of pressure on myself, and I really did need a release on that pressure. And so on the weekends I would go out and I would drink a lot. I would drunk drive. I would go to nightclubs in Hollywood. I would definitely continue that lifestyle of it started this all work and all play kind of pattern that I continued, frankly, for the bulk of my 20s.
Yeah, well, I mean, I saw it a lot, managing sales teams in my 20s. I got promoted relatively soon, but I was managing people like me and like you. And I was, in the Bay Area. And I had a couple of people that, they pretty much wear they pretty much wear the same clothes 4 days a week, because they would finish work, they'd go to San Francisco, they'd go to the clubs, stay up all night, and come back dragging themselves into work in the morning. And it became very problematic for them.
Yeah, this was the pattern that I kind of lived. So I'd work hard through the week. I would probably keep it on the, pretty mild during the week. And then Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I was out. I was drinking heavily. I was trying to go get laid. It was like I got my self-worth from feeling like I was, the center of attention, and specifically women too. I sought out, I didn't feel worthy. I ended up bringing my girlfriend to the United States. And unfortunately, we were living together. I put her through college, and she cheated on me. And it was devastating. I thought I was going to marry this woman. And this time, I think I was 25 or 26. I'd been working in sales a couple of years. And that really spiraled me into this dark place. And I would say a few months after that happened, I actually I started going to strip clubs. That was a vice that I had. And it was very popular in sales. We'd go with clients. We'd go with the guys on the team. Oh yeah. It was a very frequent.
Never came up in my sales career at all.
Yeah, I mean, I seen it. It was like something that the guys did after work or on the weekends. So that was something I think when I look, when I look back on it, it wasn't one thing, but I think that got me in a pattern of this money, alcohol, and sex. I was making a lot of money. Now I didn't have the responsibility of the girlfriend. And it was just this, they went hand in hand. It's like that Wolf of Wall Street kind of stereotype that you see and you hear. And I was single at the time, so I didn't really, think too much about it until I had a very, very bad experience. And I actually crashed my car into a tree when I was a few months after I'd been cheated on. I crashed my car into a tree head first, and the car literally was squished like an accordion, and somehow I
You were not squished though?
I was not. I mean, somehow I escaped. You always hear the story of the drunk driver who walks away and kills somebody and doesn't get injured. And fortunately, it was just a tree. The tree fared much better than my car did. But that was my first kind of like, I had been.
Well, did anything change as a result of that?
I had been caught a few times with pot. I mean, I'd always, even when I got cut to court, I was found not guilty from like pot possession in college. So I've always like gotten away with it, And again, this is a long time ago. We're talking 16 years ago, but this is like the early hints of my pattern of addiction. And after, something did change. So after, the tree incident, I decided not to drink and drive anymore. Right. I said, I could have killed someone. I could have killed myself. I had a friend in the car who could have, we were so lucky to walk away from that incident. And
you needed your car for work, I imagine. You were out driving to see prospects and customers.
Oh yeah. So I had to rent a car and buy a new car. And, I lied, like a common pattern of addiction. I lied. And I it's interesting, Andy, in that incident, I've just gotten so blessed and so lucky not to be in jail, frankly, and not to have hurt somebody in my past. I was walking, we crashed the car. We were so hammered that we just started walking back to my house. It wasn't that far from my house, maybe a mile or two. And on the way back to the house, the police stop us. and they say, hey, we heard reports of an accident. Now, they hadn't got to the car yet, so they didn't have any way to see the license plate or match it to us. And they said, we heard 2 guys fled from the scene. It wasn't that far from here. Do you guys know anything about it? And they shined a light. They said, sit on the curb. They were looking at the lights. I'm like, no, officer, we're just walking. We're going to my house. And somehow they got in the car, they left, and I didn't get caught and get a DUI. And so I lied, and my car actually got possessed, and it got sent to the investigations unit of the police department for a hit and run against a tree. So it was a hit and run property damage is what I got.
Was it in somebody's yard?
It was in public sidewalk area. So I guess it probably was attached to someone's house, but that's what they said. And I couldn't get my car back because I had to go see a detective, and they started asking me about drinking, driving. Were you drunk? Blah, blah, blah. Well, I knew, 2 days later on a Monday, this happened on a Friday night, that they couldn't prove anything. So I just said I fell asleep at the wheel and I left. I didn't want to deal with it. Didn't get caught. Hired a lawyer to fight the hit and run charge and walked away. And that's kind of happened a bunch of times in my life. It happened in college with the fake ID that I got caught for alcohol. It got caught with the pot when I got caught. So I just had this pattern of getting lucky where I never had to come out and publicly, face what I had been doing.
Is this something you've learned in retrospect as you've been working on yourself and so on, is this sort of feeling of invulnerability? I don't think that's uncommon among young males, especially if you're experiencing success in your career.
I think I learned not to drink and drive. That was something that I had been doing a lot. And after that, I said, I'm not going to do that anymore. We didn't have Uber back then in 2006. No. But I was basically not driving if I was going to go out. We'd take taxis or go with the designated driver or something. But I definitely was still in my addiction. I think that's when I started initially my therapy for addiction. And I went in and, unfortunately it was this pattern of every week. And then, the Fridays and Saturdays turned into Thursdays and Sundays. And I was drinking pretty heavily, 4 days a week. But at the same time, I was making, $250,000. I was flying high. So I'd spend money traveling. I'd spend money, again, going.
But this wasn't evident to anybody that you worked with?
Nope. I kept it all hidden. Yeah.
Wow.
No one ever said, Ian, you got a problem, or I just did a really good, and Andy, this is extremely common. So right now, as you know, I do coaching, and I also share my story, and the more public I've been with this stuff, the more people have reached out. Actually, someone reached out today and said, I need help for my brother, and he's a high-end Wall Street SVP, and he's got a family, and he's in total denial. It's extremely common, even at our company, at Salesforce, at other companies, to see high-performing executives that are able to keep it under the radar because they don't maybe they don't have hangovers, or they just don't let it show. And meanwhile, they're struggling. And just in my close circle of people that I know, I can name a few that are very top performers that have had similar struggles. And it's just, that's the problem, is because they haven't let it get to a point where it could be known or obvious, or they haven't seen a huge dip in their income or their performance. They think it's not a problem when in fact they're just living a lie.
So for you, it started coming to a head after you met your wife. How long were you guys together before you sort of reached this point where you said, look, yeah, I have a choice to make here?
Yeah. So to give you a little more context, so I get married. My wife, bless her heart, is the most beautiful woman in the world. She's kind, she's loving, and she's a Christian. She's a very, very, I would say, devout Christian. And so you have this guy who's been, addicted and crazy and wild partying, meeting this amazing woman who is and I thought to myself, she's going to tame me. I'm going to get married, and this is what I need, right? This is the responsibility. This is the relationship that's going to take me out of this thing. And
she couldn't see any of this?
I think I lied to her. So I didn't tell her. So just a little more context on my woman, about my wife. My wife is a devout follower of Christ, and she's religious, and she is also very, very loyal. And I told her, and it's unfortunate because I kept these things hidden from her, right? I didn't want her to see me as this, wild man that she couldn't marry. So I put on my best face for her. And meanwhile, we're dating and I'm still kind of getting drunk and partying and, smoking and going to strip clubs and doing some of the stuff that I did, but I wasn't telling her about it. So she didn't see this side of me. And every weekend I was with her. Right. So I'd meet her on the weekends. We had a long distance relationship, but for the most part, if I didn't see her on the weekend, then it was like, I remember I had one buddy I'd go out with and it's like, yes, I can unwind and let this part of me out. And I'd go to his house and I'd just drink 4 or 5 beers and I'd smoke a bunch of pot and I'd just go out to the bars and flirt, and just kind of this other part of me came out. It was almost like two-faced, and I never understood why. But I looked in the mirror and I'd always like question myself, like, why do you do these things? What is wrong with you? And then I would push it in the corner again. And so that continued until I got married. I got married when I was 34. So we're married now. We're going to be married 8 years, and it continued that way for the better part of 7 years. So I've been clean now for 14 months from 6 major vices that I had. So it wasn't for me one thing. A lot of people say sobriety is alcohol or sobriety is gambling. For me, it was a combination of substance and process addiction. So substance addiction is alcohol, drugs, Adderall, that type of thing. Process addiction is addiction to gambling or spending or trading. It could be trading stocks. It could be sex, pornography. It could be food, video games. So I had a bunch of these things that I always just had to keep doing to like feel, whole. I just couldn't be in this normal, even keeled state. And that was pretty much the bulk of my life until like I said, until about 14 months ago.
So, but the question you brought up, Adderall there. So I presume that was now it creeped into your work life though.
Yes.
That you're using Adderall to help on work that you weren't doing before. You were drinking separately, but now suddenly it was involved in your work.
Yeah. So just to be kind of clear, what I had struggled with during my marriage and certainly before my marriage too, primarily alcohol, pot were the big ones, but also sex, strip clubs, pornography, that type of thing. And then going to gambling. If I go to Vegas, I would be the guy that was like, everyone would go to bed at night at 1, 2 a.m. and they'd come back 9 a.m. the next morning. I was still in the table. So for me, so that was another one. And then video games too was a lot. I mean, I remember sometimes for no reason, it would be 11 at night. I'd play till 4 in the morning on a work night. I'm like, what is wrong with me? It's like I needed these constant hits to like dopamine. I was a dopamine junkie. And Adderall crept in probably four or 5 years ago, I would say. I had trouble focusing and I went to the doctor and he diagnosed me with ADD. And I got a prescription for Adderall. And it was something that once I started taking it, I loved it, right? It was like, I can be productive. And it became this crutch to like, I got to work, pop my Adderall. And then I started taking it on the weekends. I got to do gardening, take my Adderall. I got to do taxes, take my Adderall, right? So it was more of the same, right? I was an addict. That's what, for me, and I think it's very common for people in sales, for high performers, where they have this like, it's a roller coaster, and you're producing, and there's so much stress, and there's so much kind of angst and adrenaline that's going throughout the week, especially for high performers where there's high stakes, that you need a way to unwind and medicate. And when you get done with work, it's like, okay, I need something to take me out of this work mode, and you're still in this all in mode, but it's using substances. So that was kind of, I didn't even realize it. Sometimes I'd go on YouTube for hours. Sometimes like it didn't have to be substances per se, but it was something like process that I had to do just to feel like I couldn't be still. That's probably the best way to put it.
Well, so part of a question I have is since you were so high functioning while all this was going on, is part of your mindset is, well, I really can't stop, because if I change this aspect of it on the addiction side, it's going to change the performance side. I mean, did you make that connection
with the Adderall? For sure. I mean, you mentioned that one. That it's interesting. So I gave up initially. I gave up porn in February, and I can tell you kind of how and why, and give you a little context of what caused me
back when you were getting sober. Yeah,
this is 14 months ago, and then I saw myself like wanting a drink or wanting to smoke pot. And then, so I'm like, okay, these things have to go too. And then it was like, okay, video games aren't serving me anymore. I certainly am not going to gamble. Well, now COVID had hit right a month after I got sober from all the other stuff. So that made sense. And all of a sudden, like I took Instagram off my phone. I took Facebook. So I gradually could sense myself going to a place where I wanted to escape or check out. And those things that were the easy access things that I became addicted to, those process addictions, including work, frankly, I just started gradually putting boundaries around them, and I removed a lot of the social media apps from my phone, and it's amazing. I've now come to a place where I can tell you that when you don't have those things to go to, it forces you to really look within, and when you get in touch with your emotions, because you're not just medicating, you're getting dopamine to cover up how you're really feeling. And so Adderall, interestingly, was the last one to go. So I stopped all this in February, and then I realized I found myself craving Adderall to want to keep working, especially as I was in recovery, and in this really painful time, it made me feel better. And I'm like, this is also an addiction. And so I flushed all the Adderall down the toilet, and it's been almost a year for the Adderall. I think it was July when I last took my last Adderall, but it's been 14 months for everything else except the Adderall. So
what sort of support did you seek then to help you with this, your sobriety and so on?
Yeah. So to give you some context, I had, in February of 2019, I went on a bender, right? And I was in Vegas, I was with clients, and I gambled a ton, and I just got super drunk, and I went a little crazy. And I've been feeling really guilty about that for the bulk of 2019. And then finally, and I'm a man of faith and, recent Christian. And for me, something inside of me, right, was saying, you got to come clean to your wife about, the lies you've been living. But you can't come clean about all the lies, because there's been a lot of stuff that you've hidden from her. And so I started telling her a little bit about, pornography, which again, my wife's a Christian. So that in her mind is cheating, especially, doing more risky things like what I was talking about. And I had been hiding a lot of that from her. And it was, when I came clean to her, it was what I thought would be a very mild way of clearing my conscience without telling her kind of some of the more extreme things. And it was devastating for her to hear that I had been living a lie. And, I told her, I'd been doing things behind her back. And basically, for me, again, I was in denial. I thought, none of this counts as cheating because I don't have a girlfriend or an affair partner. But, for my wife, it was. And she was pregnant at the time. And that was my rock bottom. It was it's hard to talk about, but I've talked about it a few times now, but we had to go to the hospital, and she was really upset. And she, at one point after, I told her this stuff, she was shaking and she started having contractions. And she had had an abortion, or not abortion, she had had a miscarriage a year prior. And now I thought, because of what I was doing, that potentially she was going to have another miscarriage. And so we rushed off to the doctor, and he put the device on her to sense the heartbeat. And we thought we were going to lose the baby. And fortunately, in that moment, my wife, the doctor said, your wife's okay. There's a heartbeat. And I remember on the ride there, I was praying the whole time. I said, God, please don't help. Please don't hurt my wife. Please don't hurt my baby. I will do whatever I need to do to get help. And so the moment that, they did the ultrasound and we heard the heartbeat, I was like, oh, thank you, God, thank you. And I asked, I said, doctor, what's going on? She's having contractions. These feel like labor contractions. And he said, these are stress contractions. Your wife's been put through so much trauma. Her body, mimicked labor and was having stress contraction in her body. It was a physical manifestation of trauma. And at that moment I said, you know what? It's not just me. I'm hurting somebody else. The real, everyone talks about it. Most people, not 100%, but most people have to hit some type of rock bottom before they decide that they want to change. And so for me, that was it. When I thought I maybe wasn't really hurting myself or hurting my family, or what they didn't know wasn't going to hurt them, that was one thing. But then when I saw how my wife reacted when she did know some of the things, then that was in the fact that I could have literally killed my son, and he's so healthy, and things are wonderful now, and my family is wonderful because of this change. But at that moment, I didn't know, and I made a promise to God, and I said I will get help, and so that kind of propelled me into my journey of recovery, not sobriety, because sobriety and recovery are two very, very different things. Sobriety is abstaining from something. Recovery is going towards something. Mm-hmm. And so I've been going towards something wonderful in the past 14 months, and every single aspect of my life has gotten better. And
what sort of help did you seek? I mean, for people that are listening.
The first thing I did is, again, there's different types of help, but there's 12-step groups for everything. Okay, so the 12-step groups for alcohol, gambling, overeating, shopping, compulsive anything. Right. There's a 12-step. So the 12-step program. The first thing I did is I went into a 12-step group, and it happened to be that the guy who was leading that group was a pastor for a church, and I reached out to him and I said, thank you. And I just I remember going on that meeting, and I just poured my heart out. I started crying. I started telling him everything I'd done. It was like getting this stuff off my chest. I had to get, I still hadn't told my wife the degree of what I had done throughout the entire course of our marriage and before our marriage, in terms of I'll call it living a double life, because that's what it was. This wild one came out when I was traveling, and she didn't even know about it. And sometimes when she was traveling, that's really didn't happen when I was in LA, very rarely. Right. And so, because she was married to an alcoholic for 11 years, that's the interesting thing. So when I married her, I made a promise that I would give her a better life. And so I was so disappointed and upset with myself when I saw the impact that my actions had on her, that in addiction recovery, the resources, there's a lot of resources, but I'll give you 5 that I used very, very successfully. So I went to 12-step meetings. I went to 90 meetings in 90 days. So I fully immersed in the program, where it was like I was listening, I was hearing, and I realized I was not alone. That is the key, right? I thought I was alone. Right. Yeah, exactly. And these are all people, a lot of them, frankly, are successful. They're businessmen. They have, families. And a lot of them were going through what I was going through, right? So the interesting thing was there was a lot of married men who had similar issues to what happened with my wife. And it was so enlightening to realize, there was hope on the other side. Some of them actually had been divorced, and other ones had reconciled and kept their marriage intact. And so I had that support group. That's the first component you need. I had the meetings themselves. I had a group of guys on my phone that I could talk to, and just some were ahead of me, some were right alongside, and some were behind me. But that was a big element, because I didn't have this group before and I didn't know about it. The second component was having a sponsor. So the pastor who was doing the meeting ended up becoming my sponsor. It was a huge help for me when I was in the thick of it, which I'll talk about in a little bit. The third component was therapy. So I sought specifically a therapist that was kind of focused not just in addiction, but addiction in the areas where I struggled in particular. Sex and pornography was kind of the area that this therapist was focused on, because that was what had gotten my wife traumatized, knowing about that. Now, again, alcohol, I had a problem. These other things, I had a problem, but I wasn't acknowledging that at the time. I was just trying to realize that I wanted to keep my family intact. And so the therapist, the first thing she said to me was, as part of seeing you, we're going to have to do a full disclosure. She specialized in helping addicts reconcile with their families when they've been hiding things, related areas. And bless her heart, trust issues. So she said, we're going to have to do a full disclosure. That's part of my program. You're going to have to tell your wife everything you've ever done in, during, and before and after your marriage. Again, it was like my wife, when we got married, she said strip clubs are straight cheating. She told me that. So I did that when I was traveling, never told her. So I'm like, oh, great. Well, what else is going to happen? So I was really nervous about that prospect, but it's the best thing that I ever did was coming clean to my wife, because while it was the hardest thing, it was to have no secrets and to truly be accepted for who you are, because that is not who I am anymore. That's who I was. And I truly believe that. I'll still have addictive tendencies and I'll still have intensity, but I'm not going to those behaviors anymore because I have toolkit. Right. So that was kind of the third key element, was having a specialized therapist in the addiction that I struggle with. So there are therapists for alcoholics, there are therapists for people who struggle with porn, there's those for drug addicts, right? So it's all there's gambling, so specialization of therapy, I think, is really important versus just I'm seeing a therapist. You need to speak with an addiction specific therapist in the addiction that you're struggling with. That was a big part of it for me. The next component was just, again, going through that disclosure process with my wife and telling her everything. And the cool thing about this is part of the process is a polygraph. So after you go through it, you take a polygraph just to make sure you're not hiding anything, right?
Oh, really?
The trust issues. Yeah. So I took the polygraph, I passed, and it was like, it was after that she left me, right? Because she was like really taking it all in. She was pretty upset. And she left me for a week. And, you would think I would have gone right back to the addictive behaviors because I was in such a, down place and low. But at that point, I was doing it for myself. I'm like, if this was meant to be, this is a consequence of my own actions. She can choose to stay with me because of what she knows, but because of what she doesn't know, right? Or she can choose to stay with me because I'm being honest with her and she accepts that. And I'm not going to live a lie and carry anything. So I said, I will tell her even the smallest things. I mean, it's so shameful to say, but I was in this party mode where I would go to like bachelor parties with friends. We're all kind of getting married around the same time, and we'd go dancing. And I would take off my wedding ring. Doesn't seem like, oh my God, you're committing a cardinal sin, but the fact that I wanted to be, it's pretty bad, right?
Right. Yeah,
there's
absolutely.
bad intention there. The fact that I literally went dancing and didn't want it to be perceived as single, so people would dance with me or look at me differently. It tells you what kind of place I was in. I was still this kid, this boy that wanted attention and wanted to feel like, a badass. And that was kind of the pattern of the addiction I had. It was this combination of like, going big and feeling like the life of the party and getting attention. And it's very, very common. I've seen this again with a lot of married men that, try to put on their nights and go out and, act like they're kids. And it's sad because now I'm on the other side of it and I almost can't relate to the person who was doing those things. But that's the kind of example that I told my wife. I told her exactly what I did, every little detail. There was one time I got a phone number. I never physically had sex or had girlfriends or anything like that, but I did these things that were completely out of integrity with my marriage that a single guy would do. And I told her everything, and it was hard for her, but once she knew that I was committed to change, and once she saw me every week going to my meetings, going to therapy every week, I never miss a sponsor call. I still haven't to this day. It's been 14 months. I've taken on sponsees now, people that have, so that's all part of the program. The program is, I think I'm a big believer in 12-step combined with therapy, combined with having a sponsor. Where I see people fail is they might go to one meeting and they say, oh, I can't relate to these people. And then they stop because they're not ready yet. So I put my ego at the door, and the other element is faith, right? So the big thing for me, Andy, that got me sober and that helped me stay sober is the concept of letting go and letting God. And for me, I had this belief that I knew best, and I knew what I was doing, and I can handle it, and I can control it. And once I came to terms that I couldn't, and I said, God, please help me. Please remove these desires. Please remove these character traits, is what they're called in the 4-step, or character flaws, right? These character flaws. Please help remove them. I have not had the temptation. I really haven't had the temptation to get drunk. I haven't, and you can call it a miracle, but I do believe what you truly feel in your heart and what you feel with faith will happen. And for me, that's been a huge part of my journey. And it's any 12-step program, you have to give it to your higher power, whatever it is that you believe in order for the program to work. You have to have faith that somebody can do it for you versus you just relying on yourself, which hasn't worked up to that point, or you wouldn't be in this situation.
So a question for you then is thank you. You've been so open and sharing here on the program today is it's gotta be hard. I mean, there was a survey that was out that I saw that only 40% of salespeople feel comfortable talking about these issues with somebody at work. There's such a stigma still associated with even though a large number of people suffer from these challenges, is no one wants to talk about it, to your point. is how did you feel comfortable sort of deciding, okay, well, I need to share my experiences so other people can learn from these and perhaps benefit?
Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm comfortable. I mean, I talked to my wife about going on the show because I know there's a lot of listeners, and I've been on a couple podcasts where I've really gotten detailed on my story. But for me, I've come to a point in my life, Andy, where I've proven everything I need to prove. I've been number one in sales. I've been able to, create a life for myself and accumulate wealth that has set me up for, long-term security. I've been able to accomplish the things that I set out to do. But what I was never doing in my success was serving and helping other people. I could argue I was helping my customers, sure, with their business challenges, but
Right.
The truth is that I was very selfish, and I think most addicts are very selfish. And the way I look at it, if not me, then who? Who else is going to go out and share publicly? I have a lot of people that look up to me, a lot. I put out a video on LinkedIn, it'll get 5 to 15,000 views, and I'll get
Right.
50 people commenting or writing me. And this is part of who I am, right? This is never something that I want to lock away, because I know firsthand that there are a lot of salespeople who have struggles in their marriages, who are living secret lives. And I mean this, like, honesty is the answer, not having secrets. If you have things that you're ashamed of, that you're hiding from your partner, I don't care what it is, there's a problem there. For me, that has been a huge part of my recovery, is being fully and rigorously honest with myself and with my wife. And I just hope that people who are listening and people who know me couldn't say, you know what, this guy who I look up to in the sales world, and because he's been performing at such a high level, is just like me. As human, we are all broken to some degree. We all have challenges, and if no one's talking about it, then it's just going to exacerbate the problem, and people think they're alone. And they're not. It doesn't have to be alcohol or sex. It could be shopping. It could be work. It could be needing just to it could be social media. That's a huge one now, needing recognition, right? There's so many process addictions and substance addictions, and there's other addictions. There's feeling addictions, which is being addicted to love or fear or rage. There's compulsive attachment, staying with people, codependency, co-addictions, right? This whole world, not a lot of people talk about, but I'd say more people than not actually have something that would fall into one of those 4 categories. And
statistically, large, 3/4, I think, of American adults at some point have some mental health crisis that requires attention. Yeah.
I can't speak to depression. I can't speak to anxiety or panic or anything like that. I can speak to people that are performing really, really well, but have secrets that they're ashamed of, that they know they need to get help with, that they don't know where to go. Because that was me. I always thought I can do it on my own because I've done everything else on my own. But this was the one thing I couldn't shake. So once, for me, I got help. Once I admitted that I needed help and committed fully to putting my ego aside and doing what I was told to do from my therapist and from my sponsor, and working the steps and just really humbling myself in this journey, that's when I truly saw this amazing growth. And frankly, I could not and would not be doing the things I'm doing now had I still been living that other life, because I'm free. I'm not carrying this ball and chain of like the secret that I carried with me for most of my life.
Well, a question for you is I mean, you're talking about your high functioning and so on throughout all the addictions, but at some point the wheels are going to come off. It seems like, right?
They did. When I almost lost my family.
It can't be sustained forever. I mean, I know there are people listening and thinking, a younger version's preview perhaps, thinking, oh yeah, I've got this, everything's okay, I got this. But I think there's only one guarantee is the wheels do come off at some point.
They will come off if they haven't already. I promise you that, right? I went for my whole life, you can say, argue from 12 to 40 years old. So 28 years living with various types of addictions that were manageable, right? The first step is admitting that we had lost control and that our lives are not manageable. That's like the first step, is like admitting we are powerless over addiction and our lives have become unmanageable. So until you're ready to say, you know what, that's the problem, is if you're not hitting that place, and I hate to say this, but it almost like has to happen. You have to get to a place where shit falls apart, or you hurt somebody, or, you hear about all the time, the drunk driver who killed somebody, or, nearly killed himself, the person who loses their job because they have porn on their computer at work, the person that, basically
drinks at work,
drunk at the Christmas party and did something stupid. You hear about all the time. And that's unfortunately most of the time what I've seen in my program. People have to hit some type of rock bottom where they have a rude awakening. And for people that may not be there yet, I would just say, if your gut tells you have a problem, if you feel like you're out of integrity with something you're doing, that is the problem. True alignment and true congruence in life and being the best person you can be means that you are living an aligned life every single day. And I can say that. You know what? I'm not perfect. That's for sure. I still have my flaws, but I am not living a lie. I don't have behaviors that are out of integrity with who I am. The worst I can do is, maybe be snappy or short, have a long day, or, just get a little overwhelmed with things. But that's all of us, right? But I'm not doing any of those things that I was doing before. I don't lie. I'm open about who I am and my struggles. And I think for people that haven't hit that rock bottom, think about how you feel after you've done that thing that you're ashamed of, or that pattern. Think about that pattern of behavior. And every time you say, I shouldn't do this, and then you do it again, who are you hurting? Who are you really hurting, right? I have single guys that I see all the time, and it's very common now, very common, Andy. And it's unfortunate, but I know a bunch of executives that are single, that are like tech founders and that type, and they are literally going on Tinder and the dating apps and just hooking up with different women every single week, and they're addicted to that, right? This Playboy lifestyle. It's another form of an addiction, right? So they don't think they're hurting someone, but they're hurting themselves because they're not able to experience the joy of having a family, having deep connection. Connection is the antidote, the cure for addiction, right? Because addiction is, you feel alone, you feel isolated, you want to medicate, it's only you, no one understands, right? Connection is when, you know what, I have other people I can share this with who accept me, who love me. I have a family, I have kids, and that's what I have in abundance every day now, is lots of connection.
Right, and you mentioned this is, social media exacerbates the loneliness and the lack of connection.
You're right.
You may have a lot of followers, you may have a lot of friends or whatever on whichever platform, but the research is pretty clear. It's not connection. It may be called a connection, but it's not connection. It's not real human connection.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's just dopamine. It's like I feel this perfect selfie and all these people love it. It's like it is absolutely another form of addiction. Video games too. You might feel connected with other people you're playing, but you go there. It's all the same thing, right? It's all, how do we cope in healthy ways? And I'd love to talk about that because I think that is the cure, right? Connection, but also coping strategies, coping mechanisms. You have to remember, I gave up 6 things, right? So I didn't have, if you count social media, really 8. Because I got rid of my Instagram and Facebook accounts on my phone.
Right.
And I had to, at those times when I was feeling anxious or stressed or overwhelmed, I had to find something healthy. And so that's where I've been for 14 months, is like basically fueling that kind of positive, we call it outer circle behavior in my program, like things you want to go to. You don't want to be in the inner circle. You want to be in the outer circle. Middle circle is like yellow light. Outer circle's green light, and red, and inner circle's red light. You don't want to go near that. So I live in the outer circle for most of the day, which is awesome.
Good. Well, I mean, it's fantastic to hear. So unfortunately, we just have a few minutes left, but final words of wisdom for people and advice is somebody that's listening to this thinking, yeah, that sounds a little bit like me. One thing they could do right now to make a difference.
You have to, well, if you feel like my story sounds like you, I'd say get help first and foremost. That's the first thing. But the broader picture is healthy coping strategies are everything with recovery. So for me, every day I make time to exercise. I make time to pray. I make time to connect. I have lunch with my wife every day. I set boundaries. I turn off my work. I turn off my work mode at 6 p.m. I'm cooking with my family. I'm playing with my kids. I'm with my wife. We're bonding, right? So I think it's really important to think about the things that make you happy and give you joy, that are healthy, taking walks, exercising, playing music, spending time with your loved ones, connecting with people that you've missed, and try and when you're in that moment of like, I want to go to this other thing that feels like immediately comforting, Instead, think about, what would really give you long-term comfort versus that short-term comfort. Then you feel bad about yourself all day because you've just watched 4 hours of Netflix and, you neglected those things you want to do. So it spans the gamut, but learning to cope in healthy ways is critical, and also getting help in the specific areas that you're struggling. Could be any of the stuff that I mentioned. It could be something completely different, right? But for every person, I promise you, there's 1,000 others just like you that are willing to help and to walk with you and share their story and be an inspiration for you. Because I can promise you, it is better on the other side. There is nothing more fulfilling and joyful than being able to say, I am proud of myself and I have nothing to hide. And that is the feeling that I've had the past 14 months. More proud of this than any of my sales accomplishments and anything else in life, is being able to face my demons and be the man now that I've always was meant to be and that God wanted to be. So it is better on the other side, but you're going to have to get real and admit that you have a problem and seek help, or else you'll never get where you want to go and what you're seeking elsewhere.
All right, Ian. Thank you so much for spending the time with us. It's been, wow, a journey, man. Congratulations on your 14 months of sobriety and your new child.
We're just getting started, Andy, and I love going on your show. And thanks for bringing this topic to light. And thanks for shining light in an area which others may not be willing to do. It's really important. Anyone who was moved or wants to know where to get help, just send me a DM on LinkedIn. I have a soft spot in my heart to talk to people who are struggling in this area, and I do it every day. So you can
encourage people to do that.
Yep.
All right, Ian, thank you so much.
Thanks, Andy. Take care.
Okay, friends, that's it for this episode. First of all, I want to thank you for taking the time to listen. As always, I'm so grateful for your support of the show. And I want to thank my guest, Ian Koniak, for sharing his insights and his story with us today. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to this podcast, Sales Enablement with Andy Paul, on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And you can also leave us a rating or a review and let us know how we're doing. Well, we'd appreciate it. And you can do all that on your phone in less than a minute as soon as this episode is over. So thank you for your help. And thank you so much for investing your time with me today. Until next time, I'm your host, Andy Paul. Good selling, everyone. Hi, friends. I have something really exciting to share with you. We're launching a new podcast called the RevOps Podcast as part of the ringDNA podcast family. Today's leading B2B companies are embracing revenue operations as the answer to misaligned people, processes, and data that lead to recurring sales inefficiencies. However, many people still have critical questions about RevOps. What processes and tools do I need? How do I structure my team? How do I measure outcomes across sales, marketing, and customer success? And what are the best practices for doing that? So join Jordan Henderson, Jonathan Stevens, and Brandon Redlinger, and some of the world's leading revenue operations leaders as they tackle the important questions many of you face today when building a RevOps function. From ringDNA, the company that transforms sales teams into high-performing revenue drivers, comes a podcast guaranteed to go beneath the surface-level conversations and dive deep into the world of RevOps. Your hosts deliver unfiltered, thought-provoking discussions and actionable takeaways on every episode about the ideas, processes, and technology changing the B2B sales landscape. Visit ringdna.com/RevOps to learn more or subscribe now on your favorite podcast player. What if your sales team could know the moment a buyer arrives on your website and talk with them instantly? With Qualified's conversational sales and marketing platform purpose-built for Salesforce, that's all possible. It's not rocket science, it's common sense. Conversations move deals forward. Live chat, voice calls, and meeting bookers accelerate sales conversations without a single email exchange. Capture prospects in that magic moment when they're most interested in learning about your business. Head on over to qualified.com to chat with their team and learn more.